Five friends leave a basketball game on a cold February night in 1978. Nothing about this evening suggests it will become one of the most confusing and disturbing missing persons cases in American history. They're not strangers. They're not reckless. They're not unprepared. They are ordinary men with ordinary plans. But within hours, every trace of them will vanish. This is the story of the Yuba County Five. Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, Jack Hewitt, Ted Wire, Gary Mathias, all friends since childhood. They were part of a community program for adults with developmental disabilities, but they lived relatively independent lives. They held jobs, they had routines, and they had families who knew their habits down to the smallest detail. And one of those habits matters a lot: basketball. They were actually scheduled to play in a tournament the very next morning. Their uniforms were already laid out at home. This detail is important because it tells us something crucial. It tells us that they were planning to be alive, awake, and functioning the next day. Out of the five friends in this case, one of the five friends stood out: Gary Mathias. He had served in the military, but he was medically discharged because he struggled with schizophrenia. But according to family and friends, he had been stable on medication after. He was also considered capable outdoors. He was someone who, in theory, could survive if things went wrong. That assumption will become important later. On February 24th, 1978, the group drives to Chico, California, about 50 miles away to watch a college basketball game. They enjoyed the night and nothing appeared unusual. After the game around 10 p.m., they stop at a convenience store called Bear's Market. Witnesses later described them buying typical snacks like candy bars, soda, chocolate milk. Nothing that suggests panic or fear. Then they get back in the car and drive away. This is the last confirmed sighting of the Yuba County Five. From here, everything becomes uncertain, because instead of heading home on a straightforward route, their car ends up deep in the Plumas National Forest, 70 miles off course in the opposite direction of where they should be. Even today, investigators cannot explain this part of the timeline. There are no confirmed witnesses, no clear turning point, no accident report, just a gap in reality. The road they ended up on is not a casual detour, though. It is remote, cold, and mountainous, and in February, it is dangerous. Snow covers parts of the road and temperatures drop below freezing, so the question becomes unavoidable at this point. Why were they there? There are only a few possibilities. Maybe it was a wrong turn that escalated, or maybe something forced them off their route entirely. But none of these theories fully explain what comes next, because eventually the car stops. A snowmobile rider later discovers the Mercury Montego. At first glance, it looks stuck, but investigators notice something strange. The car is not heavily buried, it is not wrecked, and it appears capable of moving. Inside the vehicle were the snacks they bought earlier, and personal belongings, and detectives say there was no signs of struggle. What's even more confusing is that the keys were missing, but the car itself is not destroyed, which leads to a disturbing question. If the car was still usable, why would they leave it? The temperatures that night were deadly, so staying inside the vehicle would almost certainly have been safer than walking into the forest. And yet all five men left. Together. Into the dark. Into the snow. And away from shelter. This is the moment the case stops making logical sense. Search teams begin looking immediately, but winter conditions make everything difficult. Snow erases footprints in the wind's-covered tracks. The forest becomes silent and unreadable. Days turn into weeks, and still there's no sign of the men. Eventually, search efforts are scaled back until the snow melts, and for months, nothing is known. Then spring arrives, and the mountains finally give up pieces of the truth. Nearly 4 months later, searchers find a Forest Service trailer, and inside they find something impossible. Ted Wire. But he's dead. But not in the way you might expect. His body was wrapped in blankets on a bed as if someone wrapped him up to keep him warm. The trailer is stocked with survival supplies: food, blankets, matches, a propane heater. Everything needed to survive the winter conditions they were in. and yet most of it is untouched. Investigators believe Ted may have survived for weeks inside or near the trailer. But here's what doesn't add up. If he had access to heat, why didn't he use it properly? If he had food, why wasn't it eaten? And most importantly, who helped him? Because the evidence suggests he did not survive alone for the entire time. Theories suggest Gary may have been helping him, or maybe something a lot more sinister, because they found his shoes in the trailer. So Gary could have also made it to the trailer, yet his body wasn't found there. Nearby, the remains of the other men are found scattered in the forest. Bill Sterling, Jack Madruga, Jackie Hewitt, but Gary Mathias was still missing. Still missing to this day. At this point, investigators are left with contradictions. A working car abandoned. A forest shelter filled with unused supplies. A group that seemed unprepared for survival yet traveled together into extreme conditions. And one missing man who might hold the key to everything. The biggest questions remain. Why did they leave the car? Why did they travel deeper into the mountains instead of staying put? Why were survival supplies barely used? And probably the most important question, where is Gary Mathias? Some believe confusion played a role, disorientation, panic, and poor decision-making in freezing conditions. Others suggest something else happened on that mountain, something that interrupted their ability to think clearly or act normally. But there is no evidence of a clear attacker. There are no confirmed witness and no proven explanation. Just silence. The Yuba County Five case refuses to resolve cleanly. Every theory explains part of it, but not all of it. And I think that is what makes it so unsettling. 5 friends went to a basketball game expecting to return home the same night. Instead, they drove into the mountains and vanished into one of the most confusing cold case mysteries in the United States. And even today, nearly 50 years later, we still don't know why. What do you believe happened?